and welcome to the City Club of Boise's 4th Annual Marilyn Shuler Human Rights Forum. I'm Mike Statz, Vice President of City Club and your moderator. Thank you for joining us today. I want to welcome our radio listeners who will be joining us at a later date via Boise State Public Radio on KBSX 91.5 and its affiliates throughout Southern Idaho and Northern Nevada. This program is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel as well. Today's forum is available for our audience in large part because of our City Club partners and sponsors. I would like to take the time to thank a few of these organizations that help us achieve our mission and bring together programs like this one. Our premier sponsor is Northwest Nazarene University and the NNU College of Business. Our annual sponsor is the University of Idaho, Boise. We also receive support from our Forum Series sponsors, AARP Idaho, Bank of Idaho, Climate Tech Corporation, Echelon Group, Micron, Pacific Source Health Plans, Small Mine Development, and St. Luke's Health Systems. City Club of Boise receives grant funding from the Idaho Humanities Council. Thanks also to our media partners, which include Boise State Public Radio, 670 KBOI, Idaho Statesman, and Idaho Public Television, and our university partners, BSU and NNU. Finally, I'd like to thank our members, individuals and organizations who are foundations of City Club of Boise. If you're listening today and not a member, I encourage you to join. Today's forum is about the topic of human rights. Human rights is front and center right now across our nation, in our state, and in our city. And right now, we are looking at all kinds of challenges to human rights and issues affecting people who are different, people with different backgrounds, and people who may have different views of the world. And so City Club of Boise does an annual forum, the Marilyn Shuler Human Rights Forum, to discuss these issues. Marilyn was instrumental in founding our Landmark Fund, which provides financial support for high school students to attend City Club forums. In celebration of Marilyn's legacy, each year we recognize a student whose service and active engagement reflect Marilyn's lifelong work on behalf of young people and their civic education. This year, we are pleased to honor Erica Diamond, a senior at Idaho Fine Arts Academy in Eagle. You may have seen Erica at City Club forums over the past few years. She is recognized today for her consistent long-term commitment to making the community and her school better for those who live and learn there. Erica's concern for human rights is directly reflected in her actions raising funds for underprivileged girls at Caring Hearts School in Kenya. Erica has recorded her remarks about her work.
I believe it is our civic duty to ensure people's human rights. In addition, I believe real change can only be made one heart at a time. Because of this, it is my understanding that fostering positive, ongoing relationships between individuals and organizations promotes human rights. Two human rights that I focus on are the right to education and the right to living with dignity. Through our civic duties, such as volunteering, fundraising, staying informed, and being in dialogue with each other, we are able to provide support to people and organizations around the world. In this way, we promote human rights. For example, in the Interact Club at my school, the Idaho Fine Arts Academy, I and other students have raised funds to sponsor fellow teenagers to secure their right to an education. IFA Interact annually donates $2,400 to pay tuition and room and board for 4 underprivileged students attending Caring Hearts High School in Uglini, Kenya. According to the school's benefactor, Dr. Vincent Katuku, hope is one of the most influential powers in the world. I believe him. I was lucky to speak with the school principal and many of the students at Caring Hearts via Zoom earlier this year. I saw that hope, along with our financial assistance and hard work of the teachers and students at Caring Hearts, creates bright futures for these students. Futures where they are encouraged to work hard and pursue any career their hearts desire. Their hope gives me hope to do more for my school community and more for the generations ahead of me. In addition to the circulating hope within an encouraging atmosphere, there is also a dignity beyond what the eye can see. Dignity is represented by how one defies their trials despite the obstacles in their way. And for the past 3 years, it has been my personal pleasure to help defend the dignity of the Federation of the Blind by supporting the Cycle for Independence. Each year, the Idaho Fine Arts Academy leaves inspired by our blind counterparts who coordinate the entire event. At the Cycle for Independence, I chauffeured the moderator to each location she needed to be, but in all actuality, she pulled me along the way. Each time I have been left the event, I have been reminded that I am in control of my future, even when it feels like I am walking blindly into the danger zone. The Cycle for Independence has always left me inspired and motivated because their dignity is not defined by their limitations. Finally, I would like to highlight the Rotary Club, whose endeavors promote human rights. Our Interact Club is sponsored by the Eagle Gardens City Rotary. I have participated in many events with Rotarians from Boise and around Idaho. During these occasions, I have witnessed their generosity of spirit, donating money, planting trees, handing out books, and many, many more. I know that Rotary unites friends, neighbors, and problem solvers to create lasting changes across the globe. I've learned that the members of this community want nothing more than a world that is fair to all concerned. It is thrilling to know that I will have the opportunity to continue positively affecting the world through this wonderful organization. Through my experience in community engagement, I have found that no matter where you are coming from, what limitations are placed upon you, or how old you get to be, our desires are truly the same. We all want to make the world a better place. The organizations I have been a part of, including Interact, National Honor Society, Cycle for Independence, the Idaho Botanical Gardens, and especially the City Club of Boise, all make that dream closer to reality. I can promise you that in the decades to come, I will continue to fight for our human rights. Thank you.
Well, that was very impressive. If Erica is the representative of our young generation, I think we're going to be in good hands. Also, let's make sure we sign her up to be a moderator. She seems to be doing a better job than me. Anyway, so City Club will be presenting Erica with a certificate of recognition, and we wish her well as she prepares to head to the University of Tampa this fall, enrolling in the honors program. Now we're going to move into the heart of our program. Historically, the Marilyn Shuler Human Rights Panel, or Human Rights Forum, has honored and had one speaker. This year, City Club of Boise decided that we would have 3 speakers in a forum, in a more of a panel kind of setup this time. The reason being is because we think it's important to hear voices from different parts of the community when we're talking about human rights. We have new voices, new to Idaho. We have new voices, representative of voices that are new to the United States. And then we have the voice that has been here a long time discussing human rights in Idaho and in Boise specifically. And so with that, I would like to introduce our panel, or our panelists. Our first panelist is Whitney Mistel. Whitney is co-founder and executive director of Inclusive Idaho. Inclusive Idaho is an organization focused on building inclusion and belonging for underrepresented, underserved, and minoritized Idahoans. Next, we have Estefania Mondragon. Estefania is executive director of PODER of Idaho. PODER of Idaho aims to raise consciousness, organize, and empower the Latinx community in Idaho through connection to culture, community, and an intersectional approach to social justice. Oh, there's a hot word right there. And then finally is Dan Prinzig. Dan is the executive director of the Wassmuth Center for Human Rights. The Wassmuth Center for Human Rights has been doing this for some of the longest time period of any organization in Idaho, and has really been the leader of the human rights push in Idaho for many, many years. In fact, my mother, who just turned 88 years old, came and visited. And the one place she wanted to make sure that she saw in Idaho was the Wassmuth Center and the Anne Frank Memorial. And she couldn't believe that it was in Boise, Idaho. And so together, I hope that you will get a flavor of generational differences, but also similarities in the discussion of human rights as we have our panel discussion today. What I would like to do now is give each of our panelists a brief period of time to speak about what they do and to speak about their thoughts about human rights. So with that, Whitney, we will start with you.
Hi, thanks for having me, Mike. My name is Whitney. My pronouns are she and her. And like Mike said, I am the ED and co-founder of Inclusive Idaho. Inclusive Idaho is an organization started out of being one of the people, and then the rest of our team. I'm creating the vigil on June 2nd last summer that happened at the Capitol. And I think it's clear that human rights is the backing, the foundation of why we exist as an organization. And so following that moment at the Capitol that we had, we made a decision. We came together and said, what is it that we can do in our state and in our community to not only elevate Black lives, but include our work and the work that we're doing to include the Bipoc community and the LGBTQ plus community and women and immigrant and refugees, and so and folks with disabilities. And we wanted to create something that was bigger than the moment, and something we felt that was needed, because there are organizations in Idaho doing good work around human rights, but there's not enough, in our opinion, organizations explicitly saying that Black lives matter, or that BIPOC lives matter, or that trans lives matter. And there aren't enough that are led by folks who look like me. And I mean that in the most humble way possible, but there aren't enough that are led by Black folks or by women. So that's been quick. I'll leave it there.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Whitney. So also back to my my skills or lack thereof of a moderator. I have one more thing to tell the audience, and that is, please remember that there will be an opportunity for our panel to respond to your questions directly. You can use the Q&A function of Zoom, just type in your question, or you can email it to Morgan, M-O-R-G-A-N, at cityclubofboise.org, and it will be provided to me, and I will do my best to get to every question. I may group questions that are similar together, but we will try to work through as many questions as we can. Next, I'd like to hand the floor over to Estefania.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, should I say, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Estefania Mondragon, and I go by she, hers. And I am a daughter of Francisco y Maria Mondragon from Tarandacua, Guanajuato, by way of Woodland, California. The reason I'm here before you today is because of a migration story, and it's a story of love and migration, but that's for another time. Today I'm here to talk a little bit about migration, identity, culture, and place. We all come from a place. For me, my roots extend to the magical place called Tarandacua, Guanajuato, which in Purepecha, which are the local people, the indigenous people of the area, which I come from, is called a place where the water is born. And I spent my early childhood in Woodland, California, and now call, and in my childhood moved to Idaho, and now call Idaho home. So I'm an Idahoan through and through, for sure. But with that, there's so many stories of place, and place has so much to do with your culture
I see that Estefania has frozen. Is it just Estefania, or can the other panelists hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so why don't we move on to Dan, while hopefully we can figure out what happened with Estefania's connection, and then we can come back to Estefania. Dan?
Thank you, Mike. I'm delighted to be with you and the fellow panelists today. I'm a career educator, and the Wassmuth Center for Human Rights is an education center. I recall in my early studies, education theorist John Dewey had positioned that education is not preparation for life, education is life. Well, I would add that human rights education speaks to quality of life, a life in which one feels valued, respected, and included within the fabric of the community. The center's mission is to promote respect for human dignity and diversity through education. That alone speaks to the soul of our operation. If today's conversation is about the continuing and always evolving fight for human rights, then it begs the question, well, what are we fighting for? Drawing from the text etched in the stone of one of the center's classrooms, the Idaho Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial, Eleanor Roosevelt reminds us where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood they live in, the school or college they attend, the factory, farm, or office where they work. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. So what are we fighting for? Equality and equity. Why are we fighting? Well, no matter if we are talking about the history or the contemporary action in Idaho, we live in an environment where some, and let me take the converse of another quote in the memorial, where some would choose to do to others what they would never want done to themselves. We recall after the December defacing of the memorial, the Wassmuth Center for Human Rights proclaimed that we are everywhere. Partnering with HealthWise and the Downtown Business Association, that tagline now appears on billboards, yard signs, and banners throughout Idaho. Well, really are everywhere reminds us that people of goodwill, that people who believe in compassion, equality, justice, love, respect, and kindness are in fact everywhere. However, and we have to underline the however, we know that there are those in the community who have not felt the love and kindness, that for some, equality and justice seem more aspirational than attainable. We remember the words of hope echoed on the pages of her diary. Anne Frank died at the hands of evil. In fact, if compassion, equality, justice, love, respect, and kindness were everywhere, we would not need the Wassmuth Center for Human Rights. But we are here to educate, to empower, and to elevate, to be that beacon of light when times get dark.
Thank you so much, Dan. We are still working on getting Estefania back. So while we are still working on that, we'll just go ahead and start with our forum questions. Also, a reminder to our audience again, please email your questions for the panel to morgan@cityclubofboise.org, or plan to ask a question using the Q&A function of Zoom. So to start off, actually, I want to kind of circle back, Whitney, to something that you said. Oh, wait, Estefania is here again. Estefania, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. This is the life of Zoom and technology connections. You were actually speaking, and you were, I think, where you froze for us. You were talking about place and rights as place, and so that may be where you want to pick up again if you'd like.
All right. So yes, like I was saying, I consider myself an Idahoan now because I've lived most of my life in this place. But I still hold so many identities, right? I'm Mexican American, somewhat of Californian, and of course an Idahoan, but specifically a Nampan, and what that means, right? When people first meet me. And now I'm a Boisean. I live in Boise now. So excited to be part of this panel so I can represent my new city. But these identities allow me to move through the world and be able to communicate with a wide array of people. And as people, we tend to stay in groups where we identify with, right? Whether it be language, because of language, race, what culture, whatever it might be. But my identity and my many languages allow me to communicate with so many different people, and here in Idaho specifically. But since we tend to congregate in these groups, it's said that Mexican Americans live in two worlds. So it's a world, or as Richard Baker, a former professor at BSU, stated, dos mundos, right? Two worlds. And in his book specifically, Los Dos Mundos, Rural Mexican Americans, Another America. So if you haven't checked it out, it is some of the first research on Mexican Americans or the Mexican community in the Pacific Northwest. So it was written in 1995, but many of the themes he explores in his book can still be seen today. So what he specifically writes about is how among Anglo-Americans and Mexican Americans residents, there is two worlds. And like I said, although it was written 20 years ago, we see some of these same kind of dynamics today. He argues that because of pervasive stereotypes and exclusive policies, our Latinx population in our communities, social, economic, and political life is impeded. So we see this, and we see this to this day still, where many areas here in Idaho have high Latinx population. We're the largest minority here in Idaho, and yet do not have the same political power as our Anglo-American counterparts. So with that, but we are seeing some change. In Wilder, we saw that at a time there was all Latinx city council and mayor. In Boise, we have Representative Lisa, or City Councilwoman Lisa Sanchez, and
Oh no, I think she's frozen again. So we will go ahead and move on. We do have a question, and I saw the question that showed up about the name of the book, and we'll try to get that information out to everyone shortly. But back to my question, I'll start with you, Whitney, and then Dan, please feel free to kind of add on to this. But you made an important point about this connection. You started this as focused on Black lives, but then you realized, no, that this needs to move on to bigger groups and to other groups. Could you elaborate on that, on what caused you to decide that we need to be inclusive, as in your name, with these other groups in our efforts?
Yeah, well, and I think for me, I'm a Black woman, so it's pretty clear that I'm interested in the success and the belonging and inclusion of Black folks. But I also have a deep desire to see our communities, our country, be inclusive as a whole. And we can't, and I believe the best way to do that is actually be inclusive. And so when we were looking at how can we create an organization around this work, and what is the work that needs to be done, who are the groups and the communities and the folks who are most affected, it's really easy. I mean, you can do literally no research and come up with those answers, which are the communities that are in our mission. And so we don't want to do something that's just for us. We want to do something that's for all people and all folks in our communities that aren't experiencing equity, that aren't experiencing equality, that aren't experiencing the same experiences, the same life, the same belonging, the same inclusion as many of the white folks, frankly, who live in Idaho. And that's in all sectors, whether it be in downtown Boise in the business sector, or in schools, or students, or teachers, or whatever it looks like. And so that's really the idea behind it, that we're recognizing that it's not just Black folks who have an adverse experience when it comes to equity and equality, but there are many other folks in identities who have similar or parallel lived experiences.
Okay, thank you. And Dan, would you like to add to that?
Well, and I think, and Whitney makes such an important point with it, because what we've recognized in the center's work is we are a community of many voices. And to have the opportunity where those voices are amplified, so that, we'd like to talk in our work, not only do we want everyone invited to the table, but in fact, if they are at the table, are they allowed to speak? And if we're speaking, are we heard? And to create that opportunity where we amplify the voices to understand in our work, when we talk about injustice, injustice is not a theme or a concept. Injustice impacts a person. It impacts real lived experience. And so always in the center's work, we're trying to recognize a face and a voice to injustice. Let's talk about the impact in the community on the people. We also come from an angle too that as an education center, I want to believe that people don't know what they don't know. And so where are you going to be introduced? Where do those conversations begin? And so I think that becomes very critical in our mission as an organization.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. So I have an audience question, and I think we'll start with Dan this time. The question, it's a little long with some background, so I'll just read it here. In our community and across the country, we have seen such a horrible backlash to social justice and human rights conversations. How do each of you stay hopeful in light of the counter protests or the defacing of the Anne Frank Memorial?
That's, I'm going to kirk on that first key word there, hope. Of course, one of my go-to texts, what did Anne Frank write in the diary? In a time in despair and 2 years of hiding, she said, where there is hope, there is life. Well, we have to continue to find the life within the community. We have to continue to find that source of hope. Now, do we get discouraged? Do I get discouraged when I hear elected officials attack social justice without understanding what are they attacking? What are they afraid of? I find as an education center, and let me preface that with, I moved to Idaho in 1964. So I am a product of Idaho education. I don't know about others. I had a good education. I had a good opportunity. So I always, it pains me when I hear those in elected office criticize the education system. I thought, where did you go to school? What did you experience that now you have such a negative perception or this idea of what is happening? And why are we afraid to talk to educators about it? Why are we afraid to engage in a conversation with it? We have to maintain a place of hope. We have to believe that we can overcome and we will be better. And that was, I started in the introduction. Were we living with justice and equality, it would be a very different framing of the role of the Wassmuth Center for Human Rights. But reality keeps pushing us forward for not only what we aspire to, but what we will actually attain.
Well, thank you so much for that. And Whitney, again, just to refresh you with a question, how do each of you stay hopeful in light of the counter protests, the defacing of the Anne Frank Memorial?
That is a really good question, actually, and it's a tough one for me. I think the team, Austin, Whitley, and Jesse would say the same thing. When we started our organization, there's a lot of folks, like so many folks, and there's so much support, so many businesses and community members who were so excited to see us like start and thrive and donate or whatever you call it. But there was also a lot of folks, and we haven't been super public about it, who hunted down our addresses and sent us death threats and sent us all kinds of things, who accosted us in public, all of that stuff. And in the beginning, there were many conversations where we said, what are we doing? You know, how are 4 Black people in a state that I think is 97% white thinking that they can do something around inclusion and be successful? Like, we had that conversation. And I also think that other folks had that conversation because it's really easy to think that way. And there are really a lot of days. The last month, for example, has been hard to be hopeful, but I think the courage, honestly, of Whitley and Jesse and Austin, who are part of the Inclusive Idaho team, but also just my other counterparts who do this work in the community, just the continual courage and like the getting up. And I don't want to say like the tenacity and the grit necessarily, but just seeing folks continue to push forward the things that we want, push forward towards equity, is really hopeful for us, and feeling like that we're not alone. But I also think like a focus on the problem and not people. So I really try to do my best to really focus on the things that we are trying to make change in are systematic problems within our structures, within all of what we know as part of the fabric of society. It's sort of the saying that racism, right, is not just the fish, it's the fish and the stream and the river. And so when I can do that, like when I can really like set my sights on the fact that it's that I am not going to individually root out racism by having a conversation with every Idahoan, because that's impossible, and thinking about things from a system and a structure standpoint, instead of being so angry at individual people, individual legislators, or that person who messaged me on Facebook, or that person, right? It really helps keep it sort of in line, and reminds me that this is, one, it's a marathon. And so that's the other hope piece too. And I know we hear that a lot, but there's no expectation that an organization like Inclusive Idaho or the Wassmuth Center is going to eradicate so many of the systematic problems that we see overnight. So just keeping that in mind and not letting the sort of day-to-day individual things discourage us from continuing on.
You know,
Well,
and Mike, if I could
Sure.
chime into that, I'm thinking back, you know, when the memorial was vandalized in 2017, a national reporter picked up on the story, and when she called, the very first question she asked me, is this who and what Idaho is? The memorial had been vandalized with racist and anti-Semitic language. And that was her question, how easily she wanted to take us back to that Aryan compound that had existed in North Idaho. Our reality is we still have the stain of that compound. And we still have that stain that creates a reputation for the state that, frankly, I always see as part of my responsibility, that we have to show there is a different Idaho. That is not Idaho. That this is, in fact, a place of people of goodwill and good intent. Now, are we perfect? No. We are learning. We are evolving as a people and as a community. But I think we have to recognize that as long as these forces exist, be it 2017 or the defacing of the memorial in 2020, or frankly, some of the current acts or pieces of legislation that we see, it continues to perpetuate the stain that has been on our state for decades.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'll take a brief break for our radio listeners. You are listening to Boise State Public Radio on KBSX 91.5, and you are listening to City Club of Boise's 4th annual Marilyn Shuler Human Rights Forum. You're back, Stefania, you're back. So we had a question from the audience right before you left before, and someone actually wanted you to let the audience know exactly what was the book that you referenced. An audience member is very interested in finding that book.
Yes, so the book is called Los Dos Mundos. So I can, if someone can, who speaks Spanish, can write it in the chat. It's LOS space Mundos, MOUNDOS. And I think Los Dos Mundos, Rural Mexican Americans, Another America. And that's by Richard Baker. And he was a former professor at Boise State University. So local book, local research, please check it out.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So we were actually going through the panel and we had a question about how do you maintain hope given all these different things that have happened in sort of recent, these are current events now, right? And so we've heard from Whitney and Dan, and I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, so for me, what gives me hope is the laughter within my community. It's the strength that they have, right? Whether it's, you know, hanging out with the undocumented folks that there are within my family, that are within my community, and just being with them, that although there is so many things that are happening around you that you cannot control, you can still control being with each other and finding and being in community and being together. That ultimately has given me the most strength. Also, just being with folks that are directly impacted by what's going on, right? Whether it's, you know, my Black friends with Black Lives Matter, just checking in, seeing if they're okay. That's, you know, some of the minimal things that, you know, that are small and sometimes make a huge impact. And also just organizing together. I think, you know, sometimes when things happen, you have so much anger and or just sadness, and you just don't know where to put that energy. But finding creative ways to move forward together, you know, because unfortunately this is going to keep happening. But how do we build resilience within our communities, or the people that we most identify with, and those outside of us that also have similar experiences, whether it be racism, xenophobia, all that, homophobia, transphobia, right? Is how are we making those inroads so that we can organize together, right? That they can't beat us all.
It's a beautiful answer. So for the audience, when I spoke earlier, Estefania was not here when we heard our other two panelists speak, but the message was remarkably similar. She did not know what they said, and I think that this is part of what we're trying to get across is the thematic concept of what human rights are. We have an audience question now, and this is specifically for Inclusive Idaho. It says, what programs are being developed in Inclusive Idaho to serve the BIPOC and LGBTQ community? And before you answer that, just for our entire audience, if you could explain what BIPOC stands for.
Yeah, so BIPOC is BIPOC. The B stands for Black, the I stands for Indigenous, and then the POC stands for person or people of color. So you might know, if you follow Inclusive Idaho, that we recently went under sort of like a revamp mission sort of deal. And part of that was because we were just taking on too many things, frankly. We were a brand new organization and folks were like, oh my gosh, your name's Inclusive Idaho. So anything that has anything to do with inclusion, like we're gonna message you about it and ask you to be involved or donate or whatever it is. And for our small team, even with volunteers, even with community who's joining with us, it was just too much. So to answer the question about programs for the BIPOC and LGBTQ+ community, one, I'll say that every single thing that we do, we hope has the greatest impact for the BIPOC and LGBTQ+ community. But second, so program-wise, we have 3 programs that we're focused on now through the end of 2022 and building and continuing to build. One is Inclusive Outdoors, which is specifically intended to bring access and safety and enjoyment to underserved communities and minoritized communities, which includes the BIPOC and LGBTQ+ community. And we have many partners in that. Another one that's coming up that we're in the process of building is inclusive wellness, which we moved actually from inclusive counseling after meeting with many mental and physical health professionals and talking about what it is, what the needs of folks, especially around access. And so that program will actually be mainly and specifically for mental and physical wellness access for the BIPOC and LGBTQ+ communities. And then our third main program that'll be part of our programming, and these are our programs outside of our community engagement piece, which I think is the biggest part of what we do and probably what we do best. But inclusive schools is us wanting to encourage teacher training. So we want educators, administrators, and teachers to enter the classrooms and feel equipped and ready to not only teach, but enjoy and have classrooms of belonging and thriving for all of their students. And so I'll preface and say my husband is a teacher in the Boise School District. He went through the new teacher training 2 years ago. And he'll tell you that they spent about 25 minutes on basically what we would consider inclusion in the classroom or inclusive schools. And it only pertained to LGBTQ+ students. He teaches at Bora. There's 12 countries and 26 languages represented and all kinds of students. And so frankly, that's not enough. I'll just say that. So that program is specifically, it's for bigger than the BIPOC and LGBTQ+ community. But those are our three programs that we're building or are in the midst of being built. And some of the things that we're offering right now with inclusive schools is we have a group that meets monthly for teachers of color, but we also have a professional development credit that is offered through NNU that focuses on inclusive classrooms, and it will re-up as soon as the current one is done. But yeah, I won't keep harping on that, but community engagement, also our community engagement is always and will continue to be to elevate both of those communities. And I'm happy you can send me an email or check out our website or ask questions there too. So yeah.
So I guess the short answer is yes, we're doing a lot in those areas. So our next question, and this is certainly gonna date me a little bit, but this is a good question, and it's about sort of this concept of cross-generational connection. What steps can I take to diversify my use of social media? Who are the change makers I can learn from? Who should I look for on Instagram, right? So that's very specific, but I mean, this concept of social media, we're all engaged. I'm engaged, I think, with each one of you on some platform on social media. And so how can we utilize social media in a positive way in this world? Estefania, I would like to start with you if you'd like, and you can give your thoughts here.
Great. Yeah, there is so many great organizers across the state. And luckily with some of the campaigns that Poder has launched, like Manejando Sin Miedo or Driving Without Fear, which goal is to obtain driver's licenses for undocumented folks here in the state. We've gotten to meet quite a few of them. Some that come to mind are based in the Sun Valley area, doing a lot of great work. They're organizing undocumented folks would be Luis Lecada, so shout out to him. I don't actually know his handles off the top of my head, but highly recommend you all check out his work. He has passed some really great legislation locally. In the Magic Valley, I would check out El Chupacabras. He is a radio host. So his real name is Benjamin Reed. So check out his radio show, Radio Voz Latina, for those that are Spanish speakers out in Burley. Amazing folks too. All of them have social media platforms, and it's Latinx and social justice radio in Burley, Idaho. So amazing.
I have been on a meeting with El Chupacabra, and I tell you, you don't want to be on a meeting with him because he has this beautiful voice, and he really can mesmerize you there. So Dan, do you have any social media links that you might refer to people, or how to use social media?
You know, I go into a preface with this, and it is the importance of who is the audience that you're trying to reach. couple of years back, all of a sudden we were dealing with activists and collectivists. Okay, so I had to get it. Okay, there are generations now that are clicking through the issues. That's how they're using social media. So for our sake, we're always looking at how can we put the resources or the programs into the right vehicle to get it into the hands of the audience that it's intended. So to your point, Mike, yes, we're using ourselves, every avenue of social media that we can. And then who do we draw with and connect with in the bigger picture? We're a part of a number of national organizations with it. So be it Check, our partners in Holocaust education, or the Sites of Conscience, where we, as the memorial is a site of conscience, how are we learning from each other in the programming? And then in that turn, how are we taking what we learned and putting it into the right vehicle to get to the hands that we want it in?
Whitney, would you like to chime in on this topic? You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm just.
No, I definitely want to. I actually pulled up my phone because I follow so many folks on social media. So, but I know, like, I can tell you like 4 of their actual handle names, but Luis Laconda is a great one. And he's actually on our board. So I'm really glad that he was mentioned. And I wrote down a new organization on social media is the Idaho AAPI Youth Alliance. They just started their account, like I think a few weeks ago. And they put out some really great stuff. And then personally, sort of like a larger name that I follow and just really love everything that she puts out is Bernice King, which the name is, it's Martin Luther King Jr. starter, but she's really active and just everything she says is just phenomenal and is easy to follow and true in my opinion. So yeah, those are the probably the ones I would suggest just quickly.
Yeah, and Bernice King is Be a King on Twitter, at Be a King is who she is there.
And Luis's handle is just his name. So it's Luis Laconda. Okay.
Well, thank you all for that. Audience, we're getting a lot of questions and we're not going to be able to get through all of them. And I am picking some that may be similar or that may be very on point with current events. With that thought in mind, this question is, and I think I will start with you, Dan, just because I know that your organization is very focused in this area. Can you point parents to some good resources for starting conversations with kids?
I think always, if we can get in the hands of what has come out of the Southern Poverty Law Center's Teaching Tolerance, just the magazine itself is a great one for introducing, because when we look at it, where are you going to start the conversation? How do you begin to introduce the topic? But I want to also highlight one of our own resources, our summer reading program for young listeners. It's Human Rights for Young Listeners. We've got the stories online, but also this summer we'll actually have physical reading sessions in the memorial. And there is phenomenal literature available for the little ones, our program specifically for ages 4 to 8, that how do you talk about racism? How do you talk about diversity, inclusion? How do you talk about kindness and respect? What we're looking at, there has to be the vehicles to introduce the topics. And so that's where I encourage parents, schools, what are the kids reading? What are the materials available that we begin to set the stage with it?
And for our audience, City Club of Boise, behind the scenes, we have the fabulous Morgan Keating, who is sort of running all the show behind the scenes. She is writing these down, these recommendations down, and she will email them to all the audience members when this is over. Estefania, do you have any recommendations for how to start talking to kids about these issues?
I don't at the top of my head, but a really good resource that I always point to is Movement Strategy Center. And actually, as I'm pulling up their website, they have young Black climate leaders. So, that's, they have some great links there. They also have stuff in Spanish. So for the monolingual Spanish speakers, you can just kind of cruise their website and find amazing decks and slides. And again, that's Movement Strategy Center, and they're out of Oakland.
Okay, great. Whitney, what about you?
Yeah, I would say a good place to start. It's called, I think, the Brown Bookshelf. It's a website. It's a really great, just sometimes as a parent or an educator, you need a list to start with because it can feel overwhelming, and they do a really great job. Ibrahim Kendi's children's books are a great start. There's actually a project going on right now in Boise, though, in the Treasure Valley called Turning Pages. And it's all BIPOC. So everyone that is reading the books and all the books that are chosen are by BIPOC authors. And it's really neat. I had the privilege of being one of those folks that got to read the book. I know that I'm trying to think of a few names on there. I believe Senator Webb is one of the readers, Ty Simpson, Lita Harris. I really don't want to butcher her last name, so I'm going to refrain from saying it. But there's some good folks on that series. It's called Turning Pages. You can YouTube it. And that's a really great place to start, especially if parents want their children to see local folks and make it feel a little bit more like, hey, this is not just this big national thing, but these are folks in our community, and these are books that you can introduce to your kids. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And so here's a broad question for the whole group, and that is, are you concerned about the up-and-coming generation, as well as people from more diverse backgrounds, leaving Idaho due to its political and social climate? Estefania, perhaps you could start us off with that.
Yeah. Well, I am not worried about at least the Latinx population leaving Idaho, because many of us can't leave, right? We work here, we have our families here, and just money doesn't allow many of us to leave in general. Or even the visa programs we come here under won't allow us to work anywhere else, in specific, dairies or what have you. So with that, what we've seen is a huge increase in the Latinx population, actually. So instead of, folks of color or Latinx folks leaving Idaho, we're actually growing here. So our community doesn't have that specific problem. But what I do see is a lot of talented Latinx, Black, Indigenous, be it BIPOC folks leaving the state, because it does get overwhelming. You do get tired of organizing, all the time, or just having your humanity, judged constantly, and you yourself just constantly put on blast. But we have been losing some amazing leaders, and that is actually the result of how that came to be. Is some amazing leaders left the state that were immigrants' rights organizers. We didn't have organizing for 3 or 4 years happen around immigrants' rights, and then now the next generation is picking back up. So yeah, the problem, but got to create more leaders.
Sure. Whitney, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are yes and no. So I considered leaving myself in the short time that I've lived here. So yes, and I will echo what's just been said in saying that I've had many conversations with folks who hire Black and brown folks to enter into jobs in Idaho. And too many of those conversations have ended with, we offered them the job, we offered them $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 more than they asked to make, and they said no because of what they hear about Idaho in the news. And so I think it's really easier for us to on this panel to say hey, we can be better and we can do better, but there's a large national conversation about what's happening in our state. And whether we know our neighbors are good folks or are elevating inclusion, what is believed about us is equally as important as what is actually true. And that is occurring constantly. And then I also say that I've had many conversations with Black folks that live in Boise, which I think most folks would consider to be, if you're going to be Black or brown, this is as good as it gets, right? As far as feeling any sense of belonging or welcoming in our state. and they're leaving because it does feel just overwhelming. And it is really hard. It's really hard to constantly be the only person, to be tokenized over and over again, to be trying to fight the good fight and really do all of this work in the small group that we are in comparison to the population race numbers. So yes and no to answer that question, but I'll be honest and say that because of some of like the boards that I sit on and some of the work that we're doing, I'm really, really concerned about where we're at in the future more than I am today. I don't want us to become a white utopia. I don't want Black and brown folks to not move here, to not take jobs here. I want diversity to increase, and what we're putting out right now in the atmosphere in our legislation, whether it's with their education bills or anti-trans legislation or any of it. What folks who want to feel a place of belonging, who might look like me or some mirror image of me, feel and know is that they are not welcome. And that's really, really important, more than sort of the folks who are already living here. Is not, it's as important, but it's also really significant because it'll affect our future. And all of the work that we're doing, the three of us, is not just for today, but for the future. So.
And Dan, I think I'll let you close that out. You've been here the longest. You've seen the most of any of us who are on the screen right now. What are your thoughts?
Well, and actually picking up on a key word that Whitney just used, it's our future. It is a shared future. And that's what pains me so often in these moments. With a couple of years back, I was on a panel with the Blue Sky Institute, and I was the only panelist that was actually talking about, I'm here by choice. I was there, everybody else on the panel was talking about how they can't wait to get out of Idaho. And that just pains me, because when I talk to business leaders in the community, represented in Idaho Businesses for Education, echoing a theme that, why do not our elected leaders hear these voices, hear what's important? You know, what does Boise State bring to the community, to the state at large, that which it attracts and that what we educate for our future? And yet, this is what we're going to attack with it. So, you know, I'm at that point in age now, Mike, where I'm looking at my own grandchildren who are choosing to go to college outside of the state. You know, will they come back? You know, there is so much good here, but a community is more than just place, it's also the people. And if the people do not embrace, if we do not feel a part of the people, then I don't care what the place is. If the people are not a part of that future equation, and I'll go back to my opening remarks, and feel that they are valued and respected and included, how are we ever going to have a sense of a future in the state of Idaho?
Well, thank you very much for that. Thanks, all three of you. I apologize to our audience members whose questions we didn't get to, but we are running out of time now. I would like to close us out by saying we had that question about hope and what gives you hope. And there are days that are difficult for any advocate who works in this world, or anyone who pays attention to this even, that make it hard. But what I want the three of you to know, and I certainly hope that our audience, some members of our audience, share this feeling as well, is that the three of you actually are the people who give me hope in our community, because you get up every day, because of what you work on, because of the things that you do. And even we heard today the different perspectives on these things and these different populations that you may be working with or focused on, yet the message is, again, virtually identical. And so I want to thank all three of our panelists, Whitney Mistel from Inclusive Idaho, Estefania Mondragon from Poder, and Dan Prenzig from the Wassmuth Center. This has been the City Club of Boise's 4th annual Marilyn Shuler Human Rights Forum. I'm Mike Satz, your moderator. Thank you all so much for participating.